Okay, let's get started. I have a couple of announcements about my office hours, which is important because we're coming into an exam, right? Everybody knows we have an exam on Thursday? Next Thursday. That was an attempt to get you to stop talking. It didn't work. So I'm involved in a peer observation instructional evaluation program, and as a result, I have to move my office hours around. In particular, this week, I'm simply going to start 15 minutes late. So if you are the type to show up at 9:45 and catch me right at the beginning of my office hours, unfortunately, I'm going to be 15 minutes late, maybe 17. Next week, I have to change my office hours completely. And I think this would be advantageous anyway, right? Because 9:45 in the morning right before the exam probably isn't the best time, so 3 to 5 the day before Wednesday. So please make a note of that. Okay, so this is one of those days where I didn't finish up last time and there's material I've got to hammer through. So the first chunk of this, I'm going to try to just sort of pound through it fairly quick so that I don't have to miss any of the material that was planned for today's lecture. So this is just finishing up on intertemporal stuff. The beta delta is the last part of that. So 3 and 4 seats to Priyanka's left and 1 row back. Yes, you know I was talking about you, didn't you? That's okay. Life goes on. We all make mistakes. All right. So SNAP, food stamps. SNAP and self-control. All right, so this is just a review, right? So we have the food stamp program, which is vouchers for food. They're actually electronic benefits that you get on a card. You can buy most kinds of food. Certain kinds of really crappy food you can't get. It's means tested, which means you have to be below a certain income threshold. There's what it is. It's huge, $75 billion a year, 46 million recipients, which means you probably do know someone on food stamps. $133 per person on average. Before I was, I used to live on $200 a month on groceries, and people would say, "Oh, really? How do you do that?" And the answer was that I spent $200 and ate the food, which I purchased with it, and you could do the same with $133 if you wanted to try. That is actually not completely unrealistic, and there are lots of people who, in fact, spend only their food stamps on food. Right, so you get this, essentially a debit card. The key thing here is that the benefits are dispersed once each month. I don't actually know if you get a new card in the mail or if you get your card boosted up. It's probably the latter. But there's the money. It shows up on your account. It's just like being paid once a month. iClicker for you, okay? So the question is, this is slightly different than the question, the way it was phrased last time. Things like, if beta equals 1, in other words, if you have no present bias, if you have no self-control problem, you don't have this excessive impatience, short-term impatience, what would need to be true about you in order for you to spend substantially more of your food stamps at the beginning of the month than at the end of the month? So I don't think that the punchline was perfectly clear last time. But what we're going to see, which is people have observed in various ways, in different, it's not that surprising. It's kind of one of those things like the one more game phenomenon where you're like, yeah, of course people do that. Is that people get their food stamps at the beginning of the month and they spend too much at the beginning of the month and they don't have very much left at the end of the month. I mean, this is, if you've ever been on an allowance or any kind of fixed income, you'll know this phenomenon. So that's what we're going to find. And the question is, what would need to be true about you for that to not happen, for you to not do that, okay? Assuming that you don't have present bias preferences. So what other explanations could possibly cause this? First option, that your per day discount factor, delta, right, the long-term exponential discount factor, is really high, by which I really mean really low, right? So really extreme long-term delta discounting, or you really don't mind going hungry one day in order to eat a lot the next. So this speaks to what's called the elasticity of intertemporal substitution, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is to say, how willing are you to go short on consumption one day in order to go high on consumption the next day, or C, both must be true, or just at least one must be true, and it could be either. Okay, how many of you are there? More than that. 5, 4, 3, 2, quick, get out your iClicker. It's okay, we're just on the first question. All right, so what did you say? What? Oh, you had it out? Oh, come on. How do I restart it? I don't know how to restart it. You'll be fine, because don't worry about it. It's not going to affect your grade. Okay, so the majority of you took the easy way out, which is to say D, which could even be right. So a lot of people said A, not very many people said B, perhaps because one of the things that when you're writing multiple choice questions is you have to be really careful how you write the wrong answers, because if you write them very differently than the way you write the right answers, people will know. So in this case, one of the answers is written kind of in a very different style than the others, and it looks like a lot of people know how to take tests and guess that B was not correct on the basis of how I've written it. Who wants to explain their A answer? So you're just saying basically if you're super, super long-term impatient, then the end of the month is going to seem like a long term to you, right? And you're just going to say, in the same way that I just don't care about very long-term outcome, I can't even wait till the end of the month. But I could wait till tomorrow. It's not that I have short-term impatience. That's not it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just incredibly savage exponential discounter. Yeah? Okay. So is there anybody who said D? Sorry, remind me of your name for the millionth time. I thought I was going to guess Henry. So who said D and wants to sort of expand on Henry's answer? You came in late, so you didn't actually. But would you have said D? Of course you would. Don't worry, I'll pick on you later. How about that? Anybody else? D. Who's got a cogent answer to D? Priyanka. Oh, come on. Somebody has a substantive answer, not just one about gaming the question. Yeah. Okay. Right. So say your name. Philip. So stop me if I say this wrong. What Philip said, as I understand it, is say you had extremely rapidly diminishing marginal utility. In other words, that the first burger means a lot to you, but even like a bite after the second burger is just like, forget it. I've had my fill. I'm not going to get any benefit out of that anymore. If you know that's true, then the cost of Henry's long-term impatience, saying I don't care that much about the end of the month, so I'm going to eat too much now, is actually going to be extremely high, because you're going to foresee that will drive you below the one burger you really, really value. And you're going to say, ooh, even though I'm really impatient, that's such a big cost. I'm so unwilling to go hungry at the end of the month in exchange for being more than full now, right? The extra bite is worth nothing, very little to me now. Going short a bite at the end of the month is going to kick me in the behind. So even though I'm impatient, I'm not going to do it. So these two things pull against each other, right? So suppose that you had not a low delta, but you actually were highly willing to trade things off, not much diminishing marginal utility, then you might be willing to, it might cause you to eat more at the beginning than at the end, even if you didn't have the extreme long-term impatience, yeah? So that is correct. So my answer is D, and if you answered either A or B, you're fine, and if you answered C, sorry, no. So that's the right explanation of a B answer. And the real truth is that both of those things have to be true. So the correct answer is C. Both of those things. So if either of those things isn't true, then you might exhibit this cyclicity where at the end of the month you don't consume nearly as much at the beginning of the month. But in order for you to not do so, both of those things have to be true, and then you'll be solid. Okay, so let's get rid of that, and let me start by explaining what I mean. My guess is that most of you understand Henry's point about if delta, even if beta, even if you don't discount tomorrow relative to today by very much, just the fact of discounting each day by a slight percentage less each day could get you to caring so little about the end of the month that you would overeat in the first few days. But let me explain this point here about intertemporal substitution. We looked at this. Basically, the idea, this is diminishing marginal utility of consumption, whether it's food or money or whatever it is. And we almost always make that assumption, right? The more of something you consume, the less you care about the next unit. It's not true of everything. It's probably not true of heroin, but I don't know. Even heroin, within one consumption event, it's going to be true. So what we see is that if you were to say, I'm going to eat a lot at the beginning of the month and just fall short at the end of the month, what you'd be doing is you'd saying, at the end of the month, at the beginning of the month, I'm going to be here, and at the end of the month, I'm going to be here, which is to say, at the end of the month, I'm going to be in a place where I have a relatively high marginal utility of consumption, but at the beginning of the month, I'm going to overeat so much that I have a relatively low marginal utility of consumption, which says, basically, this diminishing marginal utility of consumption, right, tells us something about how elastic your consumption is over time, how willing you are to trade consumption now against consumption tomorrow, okay? And if it was a straight line, if you just every bite of hamburger gets you the same amount on to infinity, then you wouldn't care whether you ate, you could just eat all of your burgers the first day, get a ton of utility, and move on, and just starve the rest of the time, right? Which is in fact what I baked into the question on consumption savings in problem set 4, you'll notice, which is why the person only cares about maximizing their lifetime income. So what should you do? You should balance things out, okay? So, how bendy that thing is. We feel pretty confident that it's somewhat bendy. How bendy it is tells us how resistant you are. The more bendy it is, the more resistant you are to going short today so you can binge tomorrow. So this curvature means that you'll want to move from high consumption, you'll want to shift food from high consumption days to low consumption, which is another way of saying you'll want to smooth your consumption over time, okay? Don't eat a lot one day and very little the next. Now, it's a little unclear because there's something to be said for saying, well, I'm just going to eat rice and beans all month, and at the end of the month, I'm going to have like a fiesta and have a big party. That's not actually what we had in mind. That's a different kind of preferences. And I'm pretty confident isn't what we're seeing in the data. Okay, so here are key questions that Jesse Shapiro tried to answer. I think actually successfully did answer. Do SNAP recipients, in fact, spend their food stamps rationally? Do they smooth their consumption, or do they consume more at the beginning and less at the end of each month? We already know the answer. He knew the answer. That's, you wouldn't waste your time going and getting this huge data set if you didn't basically already know the answer. And then the question is, knowing what we're going to see, can the beta-delta model explain the irrational behavior better than the delta model? Okay, so here he is. Goes to USDA, which administers the SNAP program, gets a bunch of data from them. It's a representative sample of the U.S. population. They do this thing on an ongoing basis where they survey people on random days, and they say, you tell us what your caloric intake was, sort of based on a food diary. They have all these usual covariates. And the date of the interview, okay, so we have your caloric intake on a given day, and we know whether you're on food stamps, so we're just going to look at the food stamp sample, and we know when your last payment was received. If we take the date of the interview, right, and we subtract off the date of payment, then we get something that he calls T, which is sort of how far out you are in the course of the month, right? So we could call this sort of day of month in some sense, okay, or the day of your food stamp month. Okay, we regress daily caloric intake on the day since last payments. This whole thing about logs getting you percentage terms, I'm going to skip over because it's not super important. These are the two places, these are him doing it in logs, and you come up with these numbers that are essentially, they're not quite elasticities. What they are is they're percentage changes in caloric intake from one day to the next. So in other words, this is the better estimate because it controls for demographics. This is saying that that one day, each day into the month, your caloric consumption, the average caloric consumption of the food stamp population goes down by 0.4%, okay? So he's sort of 99.6% of the previous day's consumption. All right. We saw last time, somebody did some quick math for us, and what we came up with, you can use either of these approaches, right? So if you take that, what you get is that the decrease is just equal to 7.9439 times 30 days, right? That's the number of calories per day that your consumption drops off, and that is 238. So if you started at 2,500, which may be a little on the high side for average caloric intake, it's, there are gender differences and age differences, and you subtract off 238, you get 2,216 calories. Fine. If you wanted to do the percentage way, you would say, okay, so each day my consumption is going to be 0.996 of the previous day. I'm going to raise that to the power of 30, and that tells me that from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, I'm going to be consuming about 89% as much per day as I was at the beginning of the month. And if you then multiply that by 2,500, you get 2,262. So you get about the same either way. Difference may have to do with differences in the specification, this one being a different econometric model. And also, by the way, interestingly, not controlling for demographics, not quite sure why. Point is, this is about an 11% drop, okay? And it's a little bit more than that if you do it this way. So I'm going to, oh, that wasn't very helpful. Whoops, and that's, okay, let's just do that. Okay, so it suggests that SNAP recipients experience self-control problems, which would mean that at the beginning of the month they excessively discount the end of the month, and they overspend at the beginning of the month and regret it later. I'm inferring a lot, particularly about them regretting it later. And particularly, and also sort of, I'm inferring that what they're doing here is not just being long-term, extremely long-term impatient like Henry suggested, but that they actually have a self-control problem, some kind of present bias problem that would lead to a preference reversal. Preference reversal is what I mean by regret it later. So at the beginning of the month I'm saying, oh yes, the heck with the end of the month, and at the end of the month I'm saying, wow, I really didn't enjoy that plan, I would have preferred a different one. Okay, quickly, not quickly, in groups. What does this tell us? What does this imply about recipients' beliefs? So here, what I'm saying is that it pretty strongly suggests that their preferences are present biased. Okay. The question then is, what does this imply about their beliefs about their present bias? Are they? Does it imply that they're naive, sophisticated, or perhaps we don't have enough information? Now we already know that Priyanka is going to say C, right? It's true. If you write a multiple choice question with all of the above, it's almost always because that's the answer. But now the fact that I told you that means that you should doubt it. You guys have all seen The Princess Bride, right? The iocane scene. Yeah. Well, I won't go into it. Sorry? Sorry? Whenever. whenever you have one, yeah. Oh. That's... Okay. So I'll give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay. So what did you say? Okay. I'm going to start with somebody who didn't say C. Somebody tell me why A is the right answer. Somebody. Somebody who said A. Tell me why that's the right answer. Nobody? Is that because you already know that it was the wrong answer? So, say your name? Albert. So what Albert, are you the Albert that emailed me a few weeks ago that I haven't gotten back to? Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I did actually respond to say I'm not going to get back to you right away. So I'm sophisticated. That's not the same as procrastination, right? That's just time planning. So what Albert said was, you think at the beginning of the month that you're going to have self-control at the end of the month, so therefore you sort of binge at the beginning of the month. Now let me ask you this question. Suppose the way that we get to this evidence isn't some nice smooth downward sloping consumption, but is actually that people go out and just really max it out in the first couple of days, right? They take their kids out to, I don't know, something, Rubio's or something, 3 meals a day. Well, you can't buy Rubio's at food stamps, but you get my point. And then the rest of the month they're just flat. Okay? Do you have to believe that your future self is going to have self-control to do that? Right? Suppose you were perfectly sophisticated and you say, boy, I know that I'm not going to have the self-control to avoid doing this in the future. So therefore what? What can I do about it? Yeah. So there's no binding effect. There's no way to bind yourself. Right? It's one of these things where if it was something that you really didn't want to do, that you wanted to procrastinate, you could solve the problem by getting it out of the way. But this is a thing where you're tempted to pre-procreate. It's a nice thing it's a pleasant thing that you're tempted to do too soon. And there's very often just not very much you can do about that unless you have some kind of external constraint. Okay? So not very people said B, but why might we think that they're sophisticated? Do we have any evidence to suggest that they're sophisticated? The truth of the matter is this data doesn't provide us with that information. Remember, what do we look for as evidence of naivete? Misprediction. What do we look for evidence of sophistication? Demand for commitment devices, right? Those are the things that we look for as evidence about beliefs, and there's nothing in this data to suggest. Now, one possibility is you might say, if there was an easily available commitment device, and these people apparently, that's really effective, these people apparently aren't taking advantage of it, that might begin to suggest that they're naive. But we don't have any plausible notion of how you would commit yourself to not over-consuming at the beginning of the month. As a society, we do this for people who are mentally disabled because we take their disability check and we give it to somebody else to spend for them. So if you were like super sophisticated and really not shy, you could find someone to do that and just say, please come and deliver me a care package every day and make sure it has exactly the same caloric content. But by and large, we find ourselves in a situation where there isn't a readily available commitment device, so we don't really have any way to infer what people's beliefs are. So that's going to come back around when we talk about the welfare consequences of this. Okay. So here's the next thing we need to do. We need to rule out, right? I told you that there was, I don't like this. I told you that there were these other two possibilities. That if you had either a really high, if you had a really high delta or you had a really, really bendy utility curve, you might do this despite not being present bias. So we have to rule those two things out. And the way we do this is by estimating. We make an assumption about the model. We put some restrictions on the model. So, for example, we force beta to be equal to 1. So we write down a discounted utility rational model, and then we go and we say what value of delta would best explain the data that we see, and is that value of delta believable? Now, in this case, we also have to make an assumption about the elasticity of marginal utility of consumption with respect to consumption, which is to say we also have to pin down the curvature of this thing. So we're going to start by saying if we pin down the curvature of that thing by assuming that the utility function is a log function, right, which has an elasticity of 1, which is very commonly what people estimate from lots of different data. If we assume something about people's willingness to trade off the present against, today against tomorrow, not today against tomorrow, one time period's consumption against another, in other words, giving up food now in exchange for more food tomorrow, and then we sort of figure out what would delta have to be to explain this on the basis of Henry's explanation, and the answer is that your daily delta would have to be 0.996, which means that your yearly delta would be 0.23, right? And this is the kind of person who would basically just jump off of a cliff to enjoy the trip down. This is implausibly low. There's no way that that's the right answer. The next thing we do is that we fix delta. We say let's assume that delta is 0.8 in a discounted utility model, which is that's the yearly delta, which is pretty low, but it's not completely implausible. Then we'll back a daily delta out of that. We'll go ahead and figure out what the elasticity of intertemporal substitution would have to be in order for the discounted utility model to explain this. In other words, how unbendy, how close to a straight line would the utility function have to be for people to be willing to sort of splurge at the beginning of the month and then go short at the end of the month. And the answer is that you have to see an elasticity of intertemporal substitution of 6.7. That's not the same thing as this, but it's very closely related. What does that mean? Elasticity of intertemporal substitution is the percent change in consumption between one day and the next in response to a percent change in price between one day and the next. Okay? So 6.7 says that if the price of food today was suddenly 10% lower than the price of food tomorrow, that you would rush out and consume 67% more food today than tomorrow. Right? So suppose that you are in fact being brought your food on a daily basis. So you don't just have money you can spread out. This would say you have